Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it, man. Really looking forward to being here with you.
You are a storywork coach. What does that entail?
So, story work is the process of analyzing the words we use to create the stories we tell ourselves, aka our belief systems or perception around things in the past, in the present, or the future. So, as a story work coach, I help people quote unquote work those stories and develop a greater sense of peace, calm, fulfillment, clarity, joy around their life.
We're always telling ourselves stories about either the world or ourselves. Do you find there's a lot of people who are often telling themselves negative stories about themselves repeatedly in their minds?
Bingo. Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple pieces and aspects of this. Everybody has talked themselves into a bad mood, right? Everybody has talked down to themselves about themselves. And oftentimes we say and use words or phrasings that we would never tell a best friend. We would never talk to our sisters or brothers or parents like the way that we sometimes talk down to ourselves about ourselves. But that also goes along with our future, right? Our present, things we've experienced in the past. A lot of times our past experiences dictate where we are now and where we think we're able to go or what we think we're able to do. And there's a lot of residual, call it, I'm going to use the same word twice, but residue, right? There's a lot of gunk from past hurtful or traumatic or haunting or just unpleasant experiences that create dis-ease in the body, right? And dis-ease in our current psychological or physiological state. So a lot of it has to do with how we talk to ourselves about ourselves, and also a lot of it has to do with how we perceive the things we've experienced in the past.
The same situation can happen to me and to you, but we may view it in a completely different light, just based, like you were saying, based on our perception. Like the situation is the same, we view it differently, therefore it creates a different story in our mind and, in fact, a different reality for ourselves. Let's say you are in your early teenage years and you have your first relationship partner and it doesn't go that well, you guys break it off, and one person, obviously it's, if you cared about the person, it's going to be a hurtful experience nonetheless, but overall one person could view it as, this is a learning experience. I cared about this person, we had a great time together, I learned so much, but we're just not right for each other, and I hope to meet somebody else in the near future. And then there could be another person who had the exact same, similar, or the same breakup experience, but he's telling himself or she's telling themselves, well, I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of love because they broke up with me, or I'm never going to be able to be in a healthy relationship. It's never going to work out for me. It always ends so badly, right? And it's like, of course, that's just one experience, but sometimes it is just one experience that happens to us that shapes our entire perception. And this can occasionally, you could say, be beneficial, but most of the time, I would say it's pretty detrimental.
That's a great example, Brad, because that's something that I think all of us can relate to in some way, and we all have experiences in our lives that have caused some hurt to us, and that is very often one of the main ones is love, heartbreak. Others are grief or loss or disappointment, or we wanted things to go one way and they just went another. And you're absolutely right, how we perceive that experience can dictate a lot of our current and future reality. And it can be as simple as how, the words you're using behind the experience, but there's also a strategy and a process for, okay, like let's say that happened. Let's say we do feel a certain way about it. Let's say we don't want to feel that way about it anymore. We'd like to feel a different way or a better way, or just not even worry about that thing anymore. Then we can use story work and the story work process to kind of get those emotions up and out. And thus, now we're lighter. Now we're more clear. Now we just don't think about that thing nearly as much or nearly as often, or it doesn't create the same stress response in our body, the same fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system response state in the body as it used to. And that's a great
Hmm.
place to be in.
Generally speaking, what is the process like for somebody who's, and whether it's just one experience that they've been dealing with and telling themselves negative about, or it's like everything in their life? Where does the starting process of incorporating story work into it to get them to their desired outcome? How does that, usually flow.
There's 3 steps to even get to the table, right? And there's 3 of the hardest things you could possibly do, right? One is become aware of and admit that you need help, right? The second is to ask for it. And the third key crux step is to be able to receive it, be able to receive the help, right? And so let's say we cross those 3 boundaries and we're on a session together. The first step is to take this story that you are in, that is part of your story, your experience, you're the director, the main character, everything else, take it out of our head and put it onto the page, put it onto paper, aka write it down. And we give it a title so we can recall it and go back to that spot with the title. And then we write it out conversationally, just as if we were telling someone the story. And this is a big difference from story work and therapy, because therapy is often talk, feedback. You know, hey, I'm going to tell this thing, I'm going to vent, I'm going to share my experiences, I'm going to talk about how it feels. A lot of times that can be very helpful. Story work is not therapy, though it is therapeutic. And we go beyond therapy in that we are actually taking that story out of our heads and putting it onto the page, which then takes you from being in the story to observing the story. So now instead of acting out the scenes in your head, you're sitting in the seat of the movie theater, eating popcorn and drinking pop and watching it play out on the screen, so to speak. And that's an entirely different relationship to that particular event. And that's the very first step. And a lot of times that in and of itself can be incredibly helpful for people.
You know, I've noticed in my own experience, just being able to journal and take the thoughts and put them out on paper. I love the way you described it, because it's the story and the ideas are no longer confined to just in your brain and your space, but you know, you're taking it and you're putting it out in front of you. So you're now separate from it and you can observe it and deconstruct certain things. Hey, why do I feel this way? Because you can do that just sitting and thinking about it in your mind, but it is much more difficult. How many nights have all of us had in our past experiences or present experiences where we sit for 2 hours and we overthink about a certain problem we're having and we never find the answer? Whereas sometimes I've noticed in my experience, if I just start journaling, a page and a half later, everything's just flowing out. I don't even need to think about what I'm going to write. It just kind of starts flowing out because it's just whatever my body and mind is flowing through and experiencing. This weird, very weird thing will occur where I'll be a page and a half in, let's say, for example, and I just finished writing a sentence and I stop for a second. I'm like, wait, there's my answer. And it just flowed out of me, right? I mean, it's so helpful.
It's so helpful, and it's the first step in the process of us probably for the first time starting to deregulate and downregulate as it relates to this very stressful or hurtful or quote unquote negative experience, right? And so the first step is to title it and write it out. The second step is super easy. You just read it out loud. And that may be an entirely different set of physical sensations or mental emotional thoughts or different emotions that come with actually hearing those words come out of your mouth versus just writing it down, right? And a lot of times people read it really, really fast because they really, really want to get through it and they don't want to actually see it and they don't want to actually read it, right? And they're just flying through the first read because they want to get it done. Of course, you know, like let's get this over with. And the third step is we slow down the read. So we're not going into a robot speed, but we're drastically and greatly reducing the pace of speech so that now you can see the words on the screen and you can feel them and you can see various pieces that maybe were flying by too fast to actually notice before. It's the difference between going 75 and 25 on a highway, you know, like or on a road. Like, wow, now I can actually see the details of the thing I just drove past as opposed to, you know, it being a whir, you know, in my peripheral. And again, it's the next step in us downshifting into that parasympathetic nervous system state, which is the rest and relax or the feed and breed. And in this state, we can actually, you know, for example, digest our food. We can actually store our memories in a proper place in the proper file cabinet so we can recall them with accuracy. We can actually feel our emotions. our cells can actually regenerate. Because think about it, if you're fight or flight, you're, you know, about ready to throw hands or trying to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. And neither of those, like, your body doesn't care about its emotions at that point. It doesn't care about, memory. It's just trying to live. And a lot of us, when we think about that past experience, or when we think about our current state, or if we're, you know, talking crap to ourselves, that gets us into that fight or flight state. And then we can't do all of the aforementioned things that our bodies really need and our brains really need to do. So once we slow down the read, now we're also continuing to actualize ourselves with this thing. First it happened, and then we spent years potentially suppressing it, meaning consciously shoving it down and not dealing with it, or repressing it, meaning unconsciously or subconsciously shoving it down and not dealing with it. And now we've thought about it long enough to put it on the paper, and we've read it out loud, and then we've read it out loud again slower. And now we're going to add in, for the fourth step, some rhythmic breathing that's down regulatory, right? And so if as part of our physiology, if we take a big breath in, we take a big exhale out. If our exhales are longer than our inhales, it's another layer of us deregulating and downregulating into parasympathetic. We're actually blowing off, offloading carbon dioxide, which is the stressor molecule in that gas exchange of O2 and CO2. And so us rhythmically breathing and downshifting and reading, typically at punctuation points, we insert this breath. Now our brain gets into a rhythm. It knows this breath is coming. It starts to be able to really turn off a little bit, or put itself on autopilot a little bit, and then access even more layers of healing. And so what ends up happening with folks is they get to see this experience in a whole new way, maybe literally, maybe figuratively, but they're seeing it from a whole different nervous system state. And that's the big ding, ding, ding moment for people, is now they're seeing it as opposed to seeing it where they were before. Huge difference.
Our culture is so much about go, go, go. You get to a point where you feel like you've been missing some stuff because you've been going so fast that you can't appreciate, you can't even see what's right in front of you right now. And then you fly by and you're like, wait, I didn't cherish that experience, or I wasn't even really there in that moment. I was thinking about what I have to do in a week from now, or that talk I have to give, or whatever it is, right? And it's, this goes back to the awareness and just consciousness itself. It seems as though we're so much of the time somewhere else rather than actually here. But of course, right here is the only time that ever truly exists for us. Once the past is gone, of course, and when the future comes, it will be now. Planning is good, and you can think about future events and the possibilities for them. But when we take ourselves down these rabbit holes of endless suffering, you could say, because when you're thinking about, unless it's like a concert you're going to this Friday, how often are the concepts and the situations that you're thinking about that may or may not occur in the future, how often times are they positive? Not very often. It's always, well, what if this happens, or I could mess up doing this, or this conversation is going to be really difficult, and it's all the negative. And of course, if we take it back to the biology, thinking about things in a negative light gives the brain something to look out for. Okay, if this happens, this is how we're going to deal with it, and this and that. But obviously, most of us live in a more safe environment, and we have situations and systems put into place so that most of those situations that you're thinking about that could have a negative outcome, the negative outcome usually isn't realistic and usually has a slim to none chance of actually happening. But you still can't seem to not help yourself, but sit at night and lay awake and think about it all the time. And of course, that's a hard state to be in.
It absolutely is. And one of my favorite translations, so now we're not talking like English to French or Spanish to Italian or something like that. We're talking just like changing the word structure, or the words we're actually using to create a different response and a different thought process. That's when I say translation, that's what I mean in this context. And you're absolutely right. A lot of us have the what could go wrongs in our heads. What could go right? It's like, Dude, the first time I heard that, it was, it's like I hadn't even considered what could go right in the scenario that I was, thinking about. I had all of the what could go wrongs, and like you said, that's a good thing. That's a good thing because I was preparing for different scenarios, and I had, put in mitigation techniques for X, Y, and Z, and it made me think, oh, I didn't. Okay, yeah, no, that's good. I do need to, make sure that this happens instead of that, and then it was, okay, well, what if it goes right? And that was the greatest fuel because then I started to put myself in the scenario and the seed of being able to play out those different futures in my head. And my driving instructor 20 odd years ago, one of the first things he said was, look where you want to go because you'll probably end up going that way. Because I had this tendency to look to the right and then veer to the right, and I was like going off the side of the road. And he was like, yeah, just look where you want to go. If you want to take a right, look to the right. If you want to drive straight and stay in between these two lines, look there. You'll probably end up going that way. And it's a similar thing. And I know it's kind of like funny and a aha thing, but it's we're going to see what we're looking at in the past, present, or future. And so if we want to see the negative, we sure as heck can find the negative. If we want to see the positive, we sure as heck can find the positive. And which do you prefer? Most people, if given the choice, prefer the positive outcome versus the negative outcome. So let's look at that.
How often at most individuals' social gatherings, everybody's, hey, this went wrong today, and oh yeah, that happened to me too. Yeah, my life sucks. Oh yeah, my life sucks too, and you can relate on all the negative stuff, and it's like, well, you can do that, but also, what if you came together? Hey, I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with this. How can we help each other? How can, hey, maybe you should try this, or think about it this way, or just offering different opportunities. Of course, if you are too open-minded people, because as general as the statement sounds, you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. And that also applies for yourself. If you don't want to help, if you don't want to be helped, but you're in a bad place, well, there's not really much anyone else can do, let alone yourself. And that's going to, take a huge toll on your mental health and your reality. And I always phrase it as, it's for anybody struggling either with the whole of their life or just certain aspects. It all starts with a little bit of awareness and just a little shift in your mindset of, similar to what you said about, well, what if things go right? It's just, instead of saying to yourself 99 or 100% of the time, it's never going to work out for me. I'm never going to be able to do this. I will never be healthy. I will never be good enough. What if you could say, what if one day I could be good enough? Or maybe if I did some work, I would be able to do it. Right. And it's just that little, of course, maybe isn't where you want to go. You want to turn it into yes, but a maybe is a step in the right direction. And if you can open up your mind just a little bit like that, well, then you might start to be able to see some opportunities that were always right in front of you, but you weren't able to see before because you were so stuck in the, well, it's never going to work out. It's everything sucks. And it's like, the way I like to describe it is you have just a veil or a curtain completely over your face, and then when you start to say maybe, it's like little things open up like this. You're like, oh wait, there's some opportunities there, and there's some stuff for me, right? And it's, in my past experiences from going to where I was in a very dark place to where I am now, that's been an enlightening mindset and experience to go through.
Oh, 100%. There's a exercise I like to use with clients, and it's something that we could probably even do now if you're open to it. It's called the should detox. The should detox, right? And if you're listening to this now, you can join in as well. This will be actually really, really cool. So can we give this a go?
Absolutely.
Cool. So think of something, and again, listener, do this as well. Think of something that you might have said to yourself in the past, day, week, month, something like that. And it can be really related to just about anything, but we're going to be in the affirmative. We're going to use the word should, but it's not going to be a should not, right? It's going to be a should, right? And so I should blank, right? For me, for example, as I drink my third coffee of the day, right? My example is I should drink more water. Cool, right? That's my should statement for the sake of this exercise. Is there anything that comes to mind for you right now as we're sitting here talking about the first step of this?
I should initiate a conversation with certain individuals in my life that before wasn't sure if they'd be open to having those type of conversations, but I never tried, so I should initiate those conversations with them. That's how I could phrase it.
Okay, so we're gonna cut that down just a dash. I should initiate important conversations. How's that?
Yeah,
Do you happen to have a pen or paper nearby?
I do.
You got a magic wand, as I like to say. All right,
Yeah.
you got a wand here. All right, write down, if you would, I should initiate important conversations. And listener, you can either like hit pause or grab your pen and paper, do it on the notes section of your phone, type it out real quick. I should blank, fill in the blank. And we're going to use this one as the example.
All right.
Cool. Say that out loud for me, if you would.
I should initiate important conversations.
What does that feel like to say? What do you notice, right? Like, what does that bring up for you? Kind of describe, I should initiate important conversations for me. How does that feel?
It feels good, and it feels like I'm bringing it to the surface, and it was something that I thought about before, but haven't taken action on. Therefore, saying I should, it feels more positive, and it also feels and creates a statement in my mind that it's now more likely to happen rather than just thinking about it.
So it sounds like to me that that, and correct me with any of this stuff if I'm wrong. A lot of times there's not right or wrong answers, so to speak here, but it's, you by writing it down and by saying it out loud, you're taking a little bit more ownership of it versus it just being a floating idea. Is that accurate?
Yes, definitely.
Super cool. All right. This is the power of words. Take your pen, take your magic wand, and everybody listening, scratch out the word should and write the word could, and then read that out loud.
I could initiate important conversations.
What's the difference?
Feels a little bit more like I don't know if it's gonna happen now, or I could do it, but I could do it, but maybe it won't work out, or I don't know, along that lines.
Cool. Scratch out the word could and write the word can.
I can initiate important conversations.
How's that feel to say?
More of the positive connotation of I further taking the ownership of, yeah, I can do this.
So it brings it from something that you need to do or have to do, or it would be good for you to do, into the realm of possibility and into the realm of potentially probability because you are able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So most people should, need to, have to. Most people have a physical reaction to those words because most people don't like it when their parents try to tell them what to do, or their spouse tries to tell them what to do, or their boss tries to tell them what to do, or the government tries to tell them what to do. And believe it or not, a lot of people have resistance to themselves trying to tell themselves what to do, even if it's good for them. So part of me is like, I should drink more water. And part of me is like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. Even if it's good for me, right? And it's just like the rebel in some of us, right? Can either be a step back for people, like it kind of was for you, or it can be a step forward for people, and that it goes from, well, you need to do this, to, well, it's possible for you to do this. And it's like, oh, okay, right. And then the can is, oh, well, I am actually able to do this. Like before, it's like, no, I can't have that conversation. No way. I should have it, but I can't. And saying I can have that important conversation or initiate that important conversation is oftentimes a boost to the unconscious, subconscious, and conscious mind. So reminding ourselves that, yeah, you could open your mouth and talk to somebody and have that conversation. It's not out of the realm of possibility in any way, shape, or form. So now you're going to add a because to the end of that statement, which scientifically gets you about an extra 30% buy-in, right? You get a 30% boost by adding a because that's meaningful to you. So I can drink more water because it's good for my health and my skin. Great. Went from I should drink more water because I'm supposed to I can drink more water because it's good for me.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your because? And you could have a dozen of these. What's the first one that pops in your mind?
Mine is I can initiate important conversations because it will allow me to gain more deeper connections.
Yeah. I mean, how does that feel to say?
Right? Building upon that I can do it, it's well the reason I'm doing it is because it will then bring out this positive situation or connection in this case.
Exactly. So we have just gone through the should detox, right? Listener, I hope you took the steps to do this, and you can always rewind and do that. Give this another go. The coach in me like has to take this one step further and say, Brad, when are you going to have this conversation?
Mm.
Pull out your calendar, pull out your phone. Who do you need to have it with? When are you going to have it? And like schedule it. Action dispels overwhelm. Action casts out overwhelm. So it's great to say, it's even better to do.
I was also thinking crossing out and I'm sure you've done this, crossing out the can and just saying I initiate important conversations, putting it into the present context.
Perfect.
The affirmation, and put that in my calendar
Cool, my man. And that
for
then becomes part of your identity as the person who initiates important conversations when they quote unquote need to or should be had. And the first time you do that, it may be a little bit weird, or the 10th time you do that, it'll be a lot more comfortable. And then it'll be, again, a just something that you do. It's like, yeah, if we need to talk, I can initiate the conversation because that's what I do. I initiate important conversations.
what do affirmations do in general for just any case in life? Why should we do them in the first place?
So this goes back to self-talk, and it also overlaps with identity. So there's an old Native American proverb that goes something like this, right? There's a shaman, a medicine man, the elder, the wise grandfather, and he's in his headdress, and they're having a celebration, and there's a big fire, and all the kids are gathered around the fire, and somebody's asked to tell him a story. So he says, well, there's a great battle that's been waged inside every single one of us, and it will always be fought, and it's been fought since the beginning of time, and it'll be waged till the end of time. And it's the battle between the two wolves. And one wolf is a dark wolf. It's an evil wolf. And it manifests itself as anger and pain and judgment and jealousy and envy and sadness. And the light wolf is a good wolf. And it manifests itself as truth, kindness, altruism, and joy and happiness and love. One little brave boy or girl pipes up and asks, well, grandfather, which one wins? And he says, the one you feed.
Mm.
The one you feed. And many of us are giving T-bones and ribeyes and Thanksgiving dinners and all kinds of treats all the time to that dark wolf. And so that dark wolf is getting and has gotten very strong and very present and very loud. And the light wolf oftentimes is weak and hiding in the corner and doesn't get fed a lot, doesn't get paid attention too much. And so affirmations are, in this sense, the treats and the food for the light wolf, so that that light wolf can grow up and be big and strong and start to fight back and battle against that dark wolf and win way more often than it's winning now. For many people, this realization and this embracing this means that that inner critic is not them. So it's not me actually saying you're not good enough. It's the dark wolf. And like, whoa, that's a big difference because it's not me.
Mm.
Right. And in this context, I love myself, or I'm strong, or I got this, or I'm worthy, or I'm enough, or better me, better everyone, or I can do this, or I can initiate tough conversations. Like all of these are fuel. The light wolf is there in your corner. It's your, best friend, it's your corner man. He's chirping, he's talking, he's giving you the boost that you need to feel that thing and to do that thing and to be that thing. And again, this overlaps with identity, how we define ourselves, how we view ourselves. But those affirmations should come from you. The best ones come from a prior limiting belief, and they should not be read out of a book or pulled off of the internet or anything like that. The best ones are kind of like the ones that you created here, and they hit you in a way that you physiologically you feel the sensation that saying I am strong gives you, or I love myself gives you, versus I hate myself, or I'm weak, or I suck. All those things, like, ugh, that starts to get me to cower over and hide and crumple in on myself, versus shoulders back and down and up nice and tall and taking a big breath. Like our words can influence our physiology in many, many ways. And affirmations is the best way to positively influence your physiology without even having to really do much. You're
Yeah,
just talking.
just catering to your specific niched down situation,
Mhm.
that will make it also more powerful, because it's not just something out of a book where it's just a generalized statement, but what you could be coming up with could be a generalized statement, but it's catering very specifically to your exact situation. That will make it all the more powerful.
Kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with you see what you look for, right? Like if you say, I'm weak, you can find instances where you are weak. Sure, you can find evidence for that, right? You say I'm strong. Anybody listening can also find evidence and times in which you were strong. So again, which one do you want to see? Which one do you want to feel? Which one do you want to believe? Which one do you want to look at? Like I reckon most people would rather look at I'm strong and lean into that reality. And then, hey,
Mm,
maybe that occurs 30% of the time. And then over time, it's 50% of the time. And then over time, it's like, yeah, 95% of the time, like, yeah, I'm strong. Nobody's perfect. And because I'm strong, I start to do this. Or because I'm strong, I don't do that anymore. And then
yeah,
this is how our words can influence our habits and influence our actions and influence the physical reality even further than how we feel or what we think or, things of that nature. Because I love myself, I don't do that anymore. Because I love myself, I do this instead.
hmm
And it's like, whoa, those are totally different outcomes.
the negative stories that we're telling about ourselves, we convince ourselves that they're true, but most of the time they're not even actually true. I'm not good enough, or whatever the statement is, or the specific belief. And there's not even too much evidence in reality to confirm that belief. You're just making up stories in your head, or maybe you had one bad experience that would support that. So now you say, okay, well, you generalize to say, okay, well, every situation like that is going to be like that.
You nailed it. And so we'll story work that one bad experience that gave you the evidence of why you're weak, right? We get that up and out. We familiarize and actualize yourself with that. We put it on the screen. So now you're not living it all the time, living pieces of it all the time. It's like, oh, this is what happened. This is the thing. And then now we can come back to the dark wolf saying, oh, you're weak. And you can be like, no, that's actually not true. Like that one time I didn't show up in the way I wish I'd showed up. That was literally 12 years ago, or it was last month, or I was 12 years old when that happened, right? Whatever it is, and now we can find the evidence of what we actually do want. We can
Yeah,
celebrate the wins, which is really hard for a lot of people. But
right.
this light wolf dark wolf conversation is where I start. It's the first two sessions typically of 75 to 80% of my clients. First two sessions we're doing this, and by that third session when we come on, I'm like, hey, let's go back and read this dark wolf again. People are like, I don't want to do that, that's so full of, that guy, that dark wolf is so full of it, and they're like laughing at this,
Yeah,
at how they used to talk to themselves about themselves, because they know it's not true,
yeah.
and it's so foreign to them even after a short period of time now.
When we are taking the true accountability for our actions, whether it was a mistake we made or something wrong that we did, you can feel that, but you also separate yourself a little bit from it, and it's like, okay, well, I'm looking back at this to deconstruct it. Okay, what did I do wrong so I could do it right next time? And then you're making progress. But then there's also sometimes we're not taking true accountability. We're just like, oh yeah, because I think us saying, okay, yeah, I did that, I'm a horrible person, that isn't really true accountability, right? It's just, you're just like, oh yeah, it was bad, I did it, okay, whatever. And then it's probably going to occur again because you're not actually working through it. It is a pretty liberating experience to be able to start to build the confidence within yourself to actually look yourself in the face, or look at that exact situation that you did and it was your full responsibility and it was a negative thing that happened as of something you did or said, and you can actually look at yourself, and yeah, you might feel a little bit bad, like, oh, I can't believe I did that, but then you can progress to the point of, okay, well, I did that, I don't have to identify with that anymore. That doesn't have to be me.
Mhm.
And then you just look at it and you say, okay, this is what I did wrong. All right, I said this. All right, now I have to make sure that in a future situation, if something similar like this happens, or it's the exact same situation, I word it like this instead, or I don't do this at all, or and just come up with all those positive thought processes. You work through it in the analytical sense of just figuring out what works, what doesn't, and taking ownership for your mistakes, and being able to voice that to people too. It's uncomfortable to take accountability for something that you did wrong. You want people to forget about it and just be like, no, it's fine. You don't want to have to sit there and look at them and say, I'm sorry, or I apologize for doing this, and go in depth with it. I've been able to kind of capture this ability that I'm super grateful for, genuinely apologize and analyze it and work through it so that it doesn't happen again. It's been a beautiful process for me, and I think that is something that will help everybody if they can look at it that way.
Brad, what does that ability to do that? What does that mean about you?
That I genuinely care about the growth for myself and the other people around me. I would like for my relationships to move forward instead of end because I can't take accountability for what I did or didn't do.
So, an awesome affirmation for you might be something along the lines of, I genuinely care for myself and others. One thing I want to point out, everything you said is 100% correct. And it might not be that we did something wrong, it might be that we were wronged. You know, uh, we had something happen to us, or we experienced the negative side of somebody else's actions or thoughts or words or otherwise. And, that led us down a whole path of self-belief, or, whatever it may be. And so it can be both sides of the coin here, and the same rules apply, so to speak. It's like when we get in there, when we acknowledge it, when we work it, when we see it for what it is, then we're able to let it go. Let it go. Another great affirmation is, I am human. That covers a lot. That covers a lot.
Yeah. Letting go seems to be such a difficult concept to even think about for so many of us, let alone try to do it.
There is a big difference between moving on and moving forward. People say like time heals all wounds, right? And that is accurate to a degree. Time makes things better. But let's say, somebody has experienced loss and there is grief. Grief is a monster, right? And the best analogy I have for it is like, I'm looking for two circular things, right? So like at first, like grief is like a circle and it's huge. It's this big button and like you can hit it at any time. And it's like, all those waves of emotions come through. That button can get hit anywhere, anytime. And then over time heals all wounds. It just shrinks the button. Right? It just shrinks the button to where it's less likely to hit it. But when you do hit it, it's just like you hit it for the first time. It's just all that the waves of everything come back, right? And so accept it, move forward versus moving on, aka forgetting, aka shoving down, aka casting aside, right? It's just like, no, like it's in there. I acknowledge it. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to have my moments, and I'm going to continue to live my life. And that's a very powerful viewpoint to have.
There are many situations that will happen in your life that seems as though time isn't completely healing the wound, or the situation happened 5 years ago, but you still, think about it from time to time. And it's like, yeah, you might not think about it as much, but it's still a part of you. You don't ever fully 100% move on from someone you've been in, a romantic partnership with, but it can most definitely, if you do the work and work through it, get to the point of, when it first ended, okay, you 99% thought about them all the time. Now it just slowly goes down and down, and eventually it'll get to like maybe you think about them 0.1% of the time. Then there also are some situations and occurrences where you can let go completely. How you know if you've been able to move on or let go of a past situation or event and I do this exercise for myself, is the exercise I do is, okay, let's say the situation happened 5 years ago. If I can think about that situation in my mind and vividly imagine, what was said and everything that happened, although of course your memory isn't ever completely accurate. There's always little things and changes that your brain makes. But generally speaking, if you can think about that situation in depth and acknowledge and know that it happened, and maybe someone did you wrong or it was a bad experience, but you no longer feel angry or sad like you used to when you thought about it. That's how you know you've moved on. Whereas if you think about it and you still get super angry or sad about it, well then there's still some work to do there.
I had my first girlfriend at 13 or 14. I'm 35 now. I just got engaged last year. Like, I haven't thought about Emily in like years, and it doesn't bring me that, now 20 plus years later, right? Especially now in the relationship that I do have with my, partner and fiance and significant other now, and if I think about a relationship from 6 or 7 years ago with a different woman, that was, very meaningful and very long, and it didn't end the way that I think either one of us really wanted it to end, but it ended, and like there's a little bit of that still in there, and with that one I've certainly moved forward in every way. Haven't necessarily moved on, nor do I want to totally forget, that, because there were a lot of aspects of, that particular relationship that were very beautiful, and so I really like the example you used. I will say, for the record, I have story worked the latter one. I've written that down, like a lot of aspects of that. I've gone through this process both in my own work and with my own coaches that I've hired in the past to help me work through, that particular thing, because 4 or 5 years ago, I did have a lot of residual angst and feelings and upsetness and hurt and anger still inside of me. I'll just come back to, our words carry a whole lot more weight than we often give themselves credit for. And we also carry way more weight and power and have more power than we give ourselves credit for. And it's just a matter of like what we want to do with it and how we want to do it.
Do you think spending time alone with yourself is necessary?
Yeah, isolation is a gift. All the others are just a test of your endurance, says Charles Bukowski. Yeah, you got to spend time alone, and I've learned some of the greatest things. My greatest gifts have come from being with myself and not distracting myself and not calling a friend, like actually being with myself and with my thoughts. And if there's a ton of resistance to that for somebody listening, that means you get to lean towards that resistance. And there's even more gold in that silence. That silence is golden. Isolation doesn't mean that you're just physically alone, but you're watching Netflix and you got your phone, you're scrolling. And like, that's a big difference between what I think you're discussing and bringing up and what I'm, alluding to, versus the typical, like, oh, I'm just going to hole up on a Friday, Saturday night. I'm just have my time for me, but you're distracted the whole time. It's like, no, like, get in a journal, go on a walk. Like you said, both of us went for walks before this show, and we didn't talk beforehand and say, hey, Brad, I'm going to go on this walk before, hey, Dave, I'm going to go out on my little walk to prep for the, it's like, no, like, we went out, we cleared our heads, we got in nature, we got in the sunshine, we moved our body. There's two sides to this quarter that I'm holding, and the one side is the physical side and the other side is the mental emotional side. And it's like, we got to take care of our physical bodies just as much as we have to take care of our mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. And isolation, time alone, time in nature, quiet time is one of the best ways to cover both sides of that coin.
I thoroughly believe, whether you are more an extrovert, you still, every single human being will benefit from spending time by yourself, and like you were referring to, genuine time by yourself of, experiencing what your mind and your body is feeling and going through, not just watching, getting home at 3 p.m. and watching Netflix until 10 p.m. and you go to bed. That's not, sure, you could say that's spending time with yourself, but it's distracted time with yourself, like you were mentioning. It's not you actually being with yourself. It's just you not being with other people. That's really all it is. I've been able to see this really extraordinary growth within one of my best friends recently. He's a super out there, and like I would say like I always preach the importance of being developing yourself to become an introvert and an extrovert, whether you are geared towards one of them, which is fine, because I would say, naturally speaking, I am more geared towards being an introvert, but I've also been able to develop myself to, actually have the confidence and want to meet new people and have podcasts like this. Because it took me a few years ago, I wouldn't be able to look someone in the eyes and have a conversation with them for more than 30 seconds, for example. About one of my best friends who has been going through this growth. He still is a super out there extroverted guy, wants to talk to everyone all the time, right? And that's absolutely incredible. And but he's also, and so there was a past point or moments or years where he would just feel alone if he was by himself, and he's like, I need to be around people all the time. And recently, he's been telling me, when I'm spending time by myself and I'm reading and I'm doing this and I'm going to the gym and this, I genuinely feel good about it. And I'm actually like, he's reflecting on his past experiences, and he's like, well, at this point, if you took me a year or two ago, I would just, right now I'm here reading by myself. I'd want to just be out with someone else. But now, like, I genuinely enjoy the solitude. It's like fucking great, man.
I can identify a lot with your friend. I probably spent the first 28, 30 years of my life like needing to be around other people because I didn't like what was inside, and I didn't love myself, and I couldn't look my eyes at myself in the mirror, not like at my physical body, but like in my eyes, in my soul, and be proud of myself. Or at least I
Right.
didn't want to, or at least I didn't think about it, right? Or I was scared to. And so I can definitely identify with the transformation your friend is going through, has gone through, and that, now I'm probably more along the lines of where you are, maybe, where it's like, yeah, like I love podcasts, I get energized by this, and it's like, and like I'd rather just like not I'd rather just be with me, and just have my own time, with myself, my fiance, and kind of have our own little bubble. And so much more than like going out now, so to speak, and so um, yeah, I think it's interesting how we go through these ebbs and flows of life, and it kind of, I tell my clients to ride the wave you're on. Ride the wave you're on, whether it's a good wave, whether it's a gnarly wave, whether you're just out there like just waiting to catch a wave, whether you just got pummeled by the wave, whatever it is. It's like you're out there, we're alive, that's the most important part. And it's like, let's ride the wave you're on.
You have a book coming out in 2024. Is there anything that you can tell us about that?
I can. It's going to be self-published. So my fiance is a author and a writer, and she's been very influential in me taking up this practice for myself. Because even though I've been a professional storywork coach full time for the past 4 years, I have had my own resistance to actually taking this thing that's been in my head for so long and putting it on the page, believe it or not, right? I could do it with little stories, and I've had a lot of resistance to this. So I've been keeping, since 2010, I've been keeping a notes in my iPhone, the notes app. I call it the quotes notes. And I have probably 800 or 900, maybe close to 1,000 of these things. And some of them I said, and I said come out of my mouth and be like, oh my God, that's great. I'd like go in and type that out. Others I'd see it on a meme, others I read it in a book, others I hear it on a video, or, whatever it is. But I've got this collection of quotes in here, and I've got now my own way of coaching story work, my own process, and the exercises that I believe are most impactful for people over time. And so this is going to be a combination of the quotes from my notes quotes folder that apply to the exercises themselves, blank space to actually do them, and then rip it out because you didn't like it, and then try it again. Because that's one of my biggest qualms with these types of books is like, great, you gave me a spot to do the exercise, but I only get one, and it's like, I want to be able to have people be able to iterate and have a rough draft and then edit that draft and then come in. So it's going to be that, but to make it a book and not a workbook, I overlay my own life experiences on it, and I overlay my own examples over top of it. And It's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be pretty cool. It's right now I am available to hire, and I do that my coaching one-on-one, and there's a certain population of folks who, you know, can get on and do that with me. And I want to be able to reach another population of folks who might not have the time or the resources or the desire to meet with me for 6 months or 3 months and do this, but also connect with the message and want to actually go through that process, you know. And so I want it to be available for, you know, I don't know, I'm making numbers up, $29.99 on Amazon or something like
Yeah.
that. Like, you know, something that everybody can buy and
Yeah.
actually go through an experience. So
That's brilliant. I love that. And it's one of those, and it's also some of those, like you being able to write, like writing stuff down in general is just so enlightening for me. And it's like, that's an experience where it's like you wrote stuff down because you thought it was cool, it was a good concept, and it was something in the moment when you wrote it down, you wouldn't think you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you weren't thinking, all right, I'm going to put this in a book one day. It's just, you have happened to come to this experience to be like, all right, I'm going to write a book. And I was like, oh yeah, this would definitely apply to that. And that would help to put it in there and all that great stuff.
yeah, 100%, 100%. Like I think in my gut, I was like, oh, I'm going to use this one day, you know. And a lot of times the way I've used it, so to speak, in quotes, is, you know, maybe I'm feeling unmotivated, maybe I'm, you know, a little bit down, or maybe I just need a boost, or, you know, whatever it is. And I'll just literally, I'll just open that and I'll go and I'll scroll like 5 times. I'll get like, you know, a quarter of an inch down, and it's like not far at all, you know, but I'll just see what's on the page, and something in that scroll is going to hit me, and it'll be the right thing at the right time. I've done that often enough to where if somebody needs something, so to speak, from like, you know, like, hey, I've got a quote for you, hold on a second, you know, and then I can go in and search it and find it and send it to them. And so that helps to you know, now I'm outreaching and now I'm impacting in that manner as well. So it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Dave, thanks so much for coming on to the show today. It's been an absolute blast.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it. You've done a tremendous job in leading this conversation. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Where can people check you out? Your coaching, your socials, your content, all that great stuff.
Cool. So I'm on Instagram at daverobinson.coach, daverobinson.coach. And you can find me on my website at workyourstories.com, workyourstories.com. On there, you can scroll a little bit and click a link and schedule a 30-minute call with me. And Brad, what I would love to do for you is I'd love to give you a full coaching session with me as a thank you for having me on your show. So if you're open to that, we'll connect after we hit end on this thing, and I'll send you all the details for that. And you can actually experience Storywork for yourself, which I think would be really rad.
I appreciate that, Dave. That's awesome. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.
See y'all.